Hello, angels. It is May. It is Music Corner. My name is Lavender, and it is time to, as we do every year, recap the past couple of months. After what I would consider a moderately slow start to the year, which is normally the case, March and April were full of things, both good and bad, to talk about. Huge releases from big artists and beloved critical favorites. It was kind of an awesome time to be a music critic and fan, to be honest. And now we're going to talk about them. We're going to talk about all the projects from late February, March, and April that I covered on my blog. Full reviews of everything I'm going to be talking about today, present on my blog, Lav's Music Corner. It'll be in the description if you want to read in more detail my thoughts on a lot of these records. And without further ado, let's get into it. We're going to start today with some stuff that let me down. Starting with a pair of collaborative EPs, one that you won't be surprised to see on this list. Trippie Redd, Machine Gun Kelly, teaming up for Genre Sad Boy. I can't say I had super high expectations for this project. I really had no expectations for this project, frankly. There's one or two MGK songs I can tolerate in his decade-long discography, and while I like Trippie Redd a little bit more, it's still not a personal favorite or anything. No, I more felt inclined to cover this because everyone online was reacting as if this is the worst thing that anyone has ever heard in history, and it's just not that bad. It's a little bit bad, but it's just not that bad. I gave my honest thoughts on the project and some of the things that I actually did like about a handful of the tracks, just to try and counteract the sea of zeros that the unnecessary haters of both of these artists were dishing out to the EP. I'm not even sure it's the worst EP I ever heard this year. Another project that would make the short list of potentially worst EPs I hear in 2024, the new Rico Nasty and Boys Noise project, Hardcore Dreams. Man, this sucks. Oh my god. I like both of these artists. I have respect for Boys Noise. I like what they did with the Challenger soundtrack remix deal, and I like Rico Nasty a lot. I have praised her excessively over the years. So them coming together, first of all, to release the lead single, Areen Teen Teen, or whatever, is probably the worst song I've heard in 2024 so far. I feel pretty confident saying that. I have a blistering review of it coming out in Ringtone Magazine shortly. And while the rest of this EP is thankfully a little bit better, there is just nothing really here that I felt the need to return to. There's one song that I think is okay, but nowhere near the upper echelon of what both these artists are capable of. I feel like this is just a complete dud from two artists that I wasn't expecting a dud from. And of course, we gotta talk about it. I already talked about it in an entire another video. We gotta talk about Taylor Swift. That pissed off many a Swiftie. Taylor Swift, Tortured Poets Department. No, I do not like this record. Yes, I did hear Anthology. I think it's slightly better, though it still would not come close to cracking my top 5 Taylor albums. Where to even begin? I mean, I feel like at this point everyone knows how bad the lyrics are. Everyone knows how bad Jack Antonoff's production is, the massive success of this album, with songs still completely flooded on the Hot 100 as I record this, still number 1 on the Billboard 200 as I record this, and while those accomplishments are quite impressive, that is just the volume of people that are seeing exactly how rough this is. And for Taylor, it's not an enviable position. Not that she cares or even knows about what her fans think from the bay of her private jet anyway. The other huge commercial album to drop in the past 2 months that is exactly as bloated as Tortured Poets Department is the second album from Future and Metro Boomin, We Still Don't Trust You. God, what a difficult listen. So obviously just a bunch of throwaways, and I mean going back years. It kind of reminds me of Lana Del Rey's Blue Banisters, except Lana at her peak reminds us why even her B-sides and rarities strewn into a pseudo-studio album are still moderately compelling. Future and Metro Boomin's extracts do not work the same way. This album is fucking exhausting. It has no sense of the momentum or cohesion that its predecessor does, and it is just so clear that this was vault tracks, a bunch of shit lying around. It is 90 goddamn minutes. This album is so hard to listen to. Getting better, but still a little bit disappointing, the new Gesaffelstein album, Gamma, which certainly does not sound anything like an album I would have ever heard from the French producer. I have long been a big fan of his work, both behind the scenes and a handful of his tracks, but I really think we haven't heard the definitive album from him yet, and boy, this is not it either. This is a strange record that occasionally leaves the bounds of electronica, dance music, and club music entirely, and where it wanders off to is so bizarre, so seemingly outside of what Gesaffelstein does and knows, and the results are really strange. The vocalist that is recruited for much of this album sounds so unfortunately out of place, even when I kind of find their performances compelling, and the results are a jumbled album, a strange album that was difficult to parse, and yeah, I'm really not sure what to do with it. I was pretty excited for this Eric the Architect album. I've never been here before when it dropped in late February, partially because he dropped an EP that I adored a few years ago, and he dropped a single with James Blake production on it. He dropped another single with George Clinton featuring on it that I liked a lot, but going into this project, I just did not care for so many tracks here. I was so surprised by how many of the songs just felt like flat-out non-starters to me, missing catchy refrains, missing compelling lyricism, sometimes being awfully cringy at its horniest moments, which I never really thought Eric would get there as a solo artist, but here we are. There are occasionally moments where Eric's talents and the talents of some of his collaborators behind the scene shine through, but for the most part, this album fell far, far below the expectations I had going into it. Similarly for Flo Milli with her new album, which is kind of an interesting position to be in, because I would say that Flo Milli's first two projects surprised me in a good way. I really can't say I had that much hope and expectation to assign to her in the beginning of her career, and she really impressed me. I was surprised by how much I liked her debut, and she followed it up with a record that I also liked quite a bit. But here we are on her third project, and to me, this is the dud. And there are some moments in here where Flo Milli is really in her bag, really that hard-hitting, intense hip-hop flavor she does so well, but there's also moments where she's trying to slow it down a little bit, get in her R&B bag, maybe do something a little bit more sensual, a little bit romantic, and to me, that is where the album kind of fails spectacularly. Given that she kind of packs her albums with a bunch of short songs, it is whiplash listening through this track list and hearing her at her absolute peak, dropping gems, fiery, intense flows to just turn around and release a really boring, really awkward R&B flavored cut. Certainly a mixed bag, a project that I wanted to like a lot more than I did. And finally, the new Faye Webster project, Underdressed at the Symphony. After not loving Faye early in her career, when her albums were starting to get a little bit of momentum, I really enjoyed her 2021 album. And that had me looking forward to this, especially after I liked the first two singles from this record. But man, hearing the next two singles significantly changed how I was going into this project. And it did kind of do exactly what I was unfortunately thinking it might, which is ruin the serenity that Faye normally delivers. The bad tracks on this album aren't just boring like some of the bad songs on Faye's earlier work. They're distracting in a way that shatters the sort of persistent vibe and the warm presence of her repetition and of her dreamy, glittery, often quite minimal instrumental presence on these songs. When Faye is missing on this album, she's striking out hard. And that unfortunately makes it a pretty tough listen in a way that other Faye Webster albums I wasn't crazy about weren't. In the past, even when I haven't loved her songwriting, she's a ceaselessly pleasant artist to consume. That's not the case on Underdressed at the Symphony. It has its moments. There are songs that I like quite a bit on here, songs that are up to par with Faye's best material, but man, some of her biggest misses so far show up on this album. So before we get into my absolute favorite stuff of the past 2 months, let's talk about some of the other albums people are talking about. Starting with this Erika DeCassier album, Still. I had been meaning to look into her music because of her affiliation with New Jeans, who I love, and I was intrigued and interested by this record, to say the least. It is a wonderful display of Erika's versatile talent as an individual, but I would argue that it kind of falls short of collecting that into a compellingly meaningful series of songs that capitalizes on it. She is by all means an R&B figure to watch, one whose influences are both very unique and whose talents allow her to go places that a lot of her contemporaries can't. And when she is dealing in some of those more bizarre influences, like on the great single Ice, I think she's great. I think she's fantastic. But otherwise, and elsewhere on this record, it just kind of falls short. It lands in this weird middle zone, and it is surprisingly unidentifiable for how unique of an artist Erika is on paper. I like this record, but I don't love it. And that is exactly how I feel about the next project, Kenya Grace's The Aftertaste. I have not seen many people talking about this project, but last year, Grace over here had a TikTok hit that eventually found its way to the Hot 100 called Strangers, a song I liked a lot and still kind of like, and one that I wish was a big enough hit to throw on my year-end list last year. And I was pretty interested in hearing where she went with this album, and it definitely has its moments. I will say occasionally she falls into the accursed realm of baby doll pop in a way that is annoying, arguably even intolerable at some of the record's worst points. But for the most part, the combination of dance instrumentation and the dark minimal vocals that she delivered on Strangers is present on a lot of highlights on this record. And while sometimes it just sounds like Diet Strangers, it's her first project, and I'm willing to give her a chance because, I don't know, I see some promise in what she's doing. Speaking of promise, Dear God, the new Young Miko album. This thing is imperfect, sure. There are some tracks that I think are misguided. Unfortunately, she recruits a ton of features, basically none of whom are willing to match her energy, versatility, or even authenticity. But fuck, when she is on, there's just nothing she can't do. And this album has one highlight after another in its long track list. I think this is a great display of her potential and what she's capable of. I keep saying that over and over again, but it's kind of the tenor of a lot of these albums I've heard this year. But more so than anyone else on this list who seems like they're gearing up for a breakthrough, I would be surprised if Young Miko isn't a superstar sooner rather than later. Couple more EPs to talk about. The Baby Rose and Bad Bad Not Good collaboration, I think, turned out pretty well. It's an interesting combination of Baby Rose's very unique vocals and some more reserved, arguably standard, very tasteful instrumentals from Bad Bad Not Good, but I don't know, the results are pretty compelling. I feel similarly about Shy Girl's Club Shy EP. Never been a huge Shy Girl fan in the past, and a lot of issues that I had with her last project persist in a lot of her music. But honestly, I think this is kind of where she belongs. These dance floor anthems, she consistently eats them up. There's some great guests on this album. I love Boys Noise contribution. I love Lolo Zoi's contribution. Yeah, just a solid collection of dance tracks from Shy Girl, and I would love to see her continue to explore this lane a little bit more going forward because she's pretty good at it. The new Fortet album 3 is solid. I like it. It doesn't blow me away in the same ways that Fortet's best music has, but it does have that combination of extremely interesting textures applied to both some of the most minimal ambient electronic music and also some of the most reserved, gentle, inviting house music and dance music. This is a strong project for any electronica fans, for Fortet fans. He's going to be not exactly playing the hits or painting by numbers, but doing a lot of stuff that you're familiar with, but at the end of the day, there's a reason he's Fortet. He does this well. And in stark contrast to We Still Don't Trust You, we have the first album Future and Metro Boomin dropped this year, We Don't Trust You. And this one is a lot better, substantially better. In fact, having never been a huge Future fan and having only really loved a handful of his projects over the years, this is the best that Future has sounded consistently in a long time. Not to mention guests like Kendrick and Travis Scott and The Weeknd really make themselves known on this project. Real solid rap record, probably my favorite of the super mainstream hip-hop releases this year so far. And hovering on the border of the mainstream, Schoolboy Q with Blue Lips, another artist that never really been that fond of. The only time that I got the chance to review Schoolboy Q on this blog was his very worst moment, Crash Talk. But yeah, I came away from Blue Lips pretty happy. He is getting outside of his comfort zone and experimenting on this record with some of the harder hitting tracks like Pop and Yearn that I like quite a bit. And it's pretty consistent. He avoids a lot of the corny lyricism and bad conceptual ideas that have bothered me about his music in the past, and I'm happy with the results. This is one of my favorite Schoolboy Q projects to date. And now is my favorite part, because I hate talking about bad music. It makes my head ache and hurt and swell. So finally, let's talk about some albums that I liked, starting with the new Ariana Grande album, which it kind of seems like a lot of people have just forgot, which is crazy to me because I like this thing quite a bit. The lead single, Yes And, is one of my favorite pop songs and pop hits of the year so far, because I love Madonna. And yeah, the rest of this album is strong. Moments where Ariana is getting in her R&B bag sound good. Moments where she is at her most confident breakup with your girlfriend style presentation are quite good. And even some of the quietest and most intimate moments are quite good. I like so much of this record, aside from, an occasional slip up or two on a song that feels like a non-starter. I think this is a strong release from Ariana and certainly an improvement over Positions. And on the other side of that coin, we have Beyonce, Cowboy Carter, her indulgence into country music. A longer record, one that arguably has higher highs than Ariana's record, but certainly has lower lows. When that thing on hydroplane, baby girl, you the pilot. Yeah, there are some moments on this record that I don't care for, but God, for the most part, Beyonce is just unbelievable. The two lead singles from this are spectacular. The talent that she recruited to cover Blackbird is just wonderful. Deep cuts like Bodyguard and Daughter are so good. And what we're left with is another strong entry into the Renaissance trilogy, and I am really looking forward to see what sort of genre direction she's headed in next. The new MGMT album, Loss of Life, is one that was met with a lot of mixed reviews, which kind of surprised me because the first three singles all just totally knocked my socks off, especially Mother Nature, which is just a flat-out masterpiece. And yeah, I guess when you have that strong of a start, a record that is just solid may feel like selling it short a little bit. But yeah, this is MGMT sort of throwing their influences back to an era of rock music that I can't imagine the youthful versions of themselves on their debut would have ever thought would influence them. But just like I said in my review, this is the most Foxygen that I've ever heard MGMT sound. And you know what? I fucking love Foxygen. The new Jalen album, Acoma, is quite good. We got a new EP from Jalen last year that I liked. This is even better. I'm glad a lot of this material was saved for a studio album because it is quite good. The textures here are incredible. These bizarre, surreal, grinding, sort of industrial drums and beats and sounds that are just weaved into these bizarre dance music compositions. It is just so futuristic at points, so otherworldly sounding. It's a really interesting combination and one that abstract and experimental dance and electronic music fans will not want to miss. A couple of new EPs, starting with the 3-track project from Foxtails, Home, that they dropped earlier this year. Foxtails really blew me away back in 2022 when they added a violinist to their roster and dropped what I think is far and away their best album to date, and honestly one of the better screamo records I've heard in this decade so far. And I was really looking forward to hearing new material from them, excited about this drop, and yeah, it basically lives up to it. I mean, this project gets better and better with each song. It has those blistering emotional peaks. It has those sullen, dreary lows, and they transition between them really well. Everything that I liked about the last Foxtails project is here on this one. And even more exciting, the new Crush Fund EP, New Fixation. I was so excited about this after hearing the lead single, and fuck, they lived up to it. This project is great. It is short. It gets right to the point. Loud, blistering music, intense performances. Love the group vocals that pop up all over this thing. The frenetic, unsettled energy of its best tracks. This is an awesome punk project that I recommend for fans of either punk or hardcore flavored stuff. Dig into this. Check it out. Speak of the devil, Mannequin Pussy with I Got Heaven, a new album that I was really hyped about because I liked all of the singles, and yeah, it mostly lived up to it. I still like a lot of these songs. The energy and intensity they bring is ferocious, and this is the most dog-coded album I have heard this year. Look into the lyrics, and you will understand why. Bitches that bark are loving this thing. 3 albums that I think are fucking amazing, starting with that one right there, the new Kim Gordon project, The Collective. It is fucking ridiculous. On some Scott Walker, David Bowie shit, how long Kim Gordon has been making music to release a project that is this experimental, this much of an expanse upon her sound. And it's a sound that she hit at on her previous solo album, but boy, one that she is digging real fucking deep into here. The trap drums all over this thing, the bludgeoning distortion through which they are delivered. And of course, all of that is cut with the lethal monotone vocals. The performances that she delivers all across this record are crazy with just how intense they manage to be, how captivating her lyrics and her vocals are all over this project. This is just a wonderful, wonderful record, one that surprised me in the absolute best way. I was less surprised by the new Julia Holter album, Something in the Room She Moves, but only because it has been more than 10 years since Julia has released anything that wasn't a fucking masterpiece. Yeah, I basically praised every single song released in advance of this project with all of my critical might. And yeah, it's a fantastic album. In some ways, it is a little bit more focused conceptually than its predecessor, Aviary, but in some ways, like the track Me, You, this sort of experimental, pseudo-ambient experiment in group vocalization, it is even more abstract than anything that Julia has done before, and it toes that line flawlessly. This is definitely going to be among my favorite albums of the year. Once again, Julia Holter is mystifying at points, whimsical at others, and utterly magical throughout. And yet somehow, unbelievably, I was so sure that this was going to be one of, if not my favorite album of the year. It's not even my favorite album of the last 2 months. Vampire Weekend. This new album, Only God Was Above Us, is ridiculously fucking good, astonishingly fucking good. It is basically all hits, no misses. It might be my favorite Vampire Weekend record ever, and I'm a huge fucking fan who just called Modern Vampires of the City my favorite album of 2013. It's ridiculous how good this album is. I mean, the single after single after single have all stayed in my rotation. They're all remarkable, and I mean, among the deep cuts, what can you say? The closing track to this album is one of the most indulgent experiments that Vampire Weekend has ever gone on, and yet it is intercut with a moment like Pravda, which is inescapably catchy, and the brilliant opener Ice Cream Piano. I have good things to say about every song on this record. I have great goddamn things to say about every song on this record. I mean, I almost just can't believe it. I still go back and listen to this entire album, and it's almost just hard for me to believe that Vampire Weekend, doing what they do, elevating their sound, getting a little bit more sonically adventurous with some of the noise, distortion, and execution of the literal sound, and delivering Ezra's inescapably verbose poetry with a slice of politics. It is spectacular. The reflection both of the world and of themselves that is presented on this record while maintaining such a catchy demeanor. I find it impossible to think about a song like Classical, which says so much, but does it in such a catchy, such a compelling, such a pithy way. This album is a remarkable achievement, and fuck, if anything better than this drops in 2024, it's going to be a great goddamn year. And that's all. That's it. Sorry, I'm a week late on dropping this. I'm busy and tired, and I have no idea what I'm going to do next, but hopefully it won't take me as long this time. I know I say that every time, and it always takes me as long, but I'm going to try. Thank you for watching Cutie Pies, and I'll see you next time.